Welcome to Starbound. My name's the Voice Ogre, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new stories of Sunspire Academy, which I happen to do, and Freyrin and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's get into today's story.
Grissom found out about his new assignment the way he found out about most things, violently and while hungover. The bar was called The Last Drop, which was either poetic or prophetic, depending on your blood alcohol content. It squatted on the edge of Fort Armstrong like a suspicious growth, all reinforced concrete and poor decisions. The kind of place where the health inspector had given up and just started bringing offerings to whatever lived in the kitchen. Grissom sat at his usual spot, the corner booth with sightlines to all exits and a clear throwing distance to the jukebox that still played his ex-wife's favorite song. They'd shot it twice this month already, but the damn thing was like him, too stubborn to die properly. Diplomatic mission? He squinted at the orders through the smoke of his morning cigar. A thing that could generously be called tobacco and accurately be called a war crime. The paper was official, all gold seals and fancy letterhead that probably cost more than his bar tab. Which, to be fair, was saying something. I am no diplomat. I'm a Marine. We don't do words, we do ordnance. Lieutenant Park stood at parade rest, maintaining a safe distance of 3 meters and 1 blast shield. She was new. Still had that shine Academy graduates got before reality wore it off. Give her 6 months, and she'd be drinking breakfast like the rest of them. Orders are orders, Sergeant. Last time someone said that to me, I ended up married. Grissom downed what was either his 4th whiskey or his 1st. Time was negotiable before noon. Even old enough to be in here, Lieutenant Babyface? I'm 26, Sergeant. Jesus Christ on a pogo stick. They're sending infants to give me orders now. He studied her through bloodshot eyes that had seen too much and remembered too little. You know who I am, kid? Your service record was extensive reading, Sergeant. That's fancy talk for terrifying, isn't it? He grinned, showing teeth that had bitten through more than regulations allowed. One was gold, a souvenir from a bar fight with a Regalian who'd claimed humans couldn't take a punch. The Regalian was still in therapy. They tell you about Saturn? The file said you held off an entire battalion with improvised explosives and harsh language. Harsh language. He slapped the table hard enough to make Park flinch. I told those spider-looking sons of bitches their mothers were so ugly that their fathers had to get drunk just to reproduce asexually. But my squad 3 hours to evacuate. He leaned back, cigar smoke wreathing his head like a profane halo. Of course, then I had to blow up half the refinery to make my point, but that's just punctuation. The transport leaves in an hour, Sergeant. The brief suggests formal attire. They give me a fancy uniform? Park hesitated. That was all the answer Grissom needed. They said to wear whatever makes you comfortable. Grissom's grin could have powered a small city and traumatized a large one. Outstanding. Got just the thing. He stood, all 5 feet and 2 inches of compressed Marine Corps rage and paternal disappointment. The other patrons, a mix of off-duty soldiers, local criminals too small time to matter, and at least one alien who'd gotten lost and was too scared to leave, all found somewhere else to look. Hey, Kowalski! Grissom shouted at the bartender. a man who'd lost 3 fingers to alien fauna and replaced them with bottle openers.
Put this on my tab. Your tab's longer than my rap sheet, Sarge. And you better commit more crimes.
An hour later, he stood at the spaceport looking like humanity's worst ambassador and Earth's most honest one. His combat armor was the formal version, which meant he'd hosed off the blood and only kept half his usual ammunition. The grenades were dress grenades, which were like regular grenades, but with prettier pins. The diplomat he'd carved into the chest plate with his K-bar knife that was still cooling, the metal edges sharp enough to be technically classified as a weapon.
Is that a flamethrower?
Park asked, staring at what was definitely not standard diplomatic equipment.
Nah.
Grissom adjusted the tank on his back.
It's a conversation starter. It's completely different. You see, this here's got a wider nozzle for more inclusive dialogue.
Sergeant, I don't think...
Well, that's your problem right there, Lieutenant. Thinking.
He stomped up the ramp of the transport, each footfall ringing like a threat.
Thinking's what gets you killed. Or worse, married. Sometimes both if you're real unlucky.
The transport was a sleek diplomatic courier, all curves and politeness. Grissom looked at it the way a barbarian might look at a tea ceremony, with deep suspicion and mild nausea.
This thing got weapons?
It's a diplomatic vessel, the pilot said. He was young, too. Another Academy washout who thought regulations were guidelines instead of suggestions. Article 7 of the Galactic Accord prohibits...
So, no weapons, then.
Grissom settled into a seat that groaned under the weight of his ordnance.
It's a good thing I brought my own. What's your name, son?
Ensign Taylors, sir.
Any relation to Sergeant Maria Taylors? It's a mean lady. Face like an angel. It's a right hook like a freight train.
My mother, sir. Grissom laughed hard enough to set off 3 different motion sensors.
That woman still owes me 50 credits in a rematch. You tell her Grissom says hi, and I still got the scar, yeah?
Which scar, sir?
Yeah, she'll know.
The engine spun up with a whine that Grissom's trained ear immediately identified as probably not supposed to sound like that. But then again, half his career had been spent in vehicles held together by duct tape and a prayer, so what was one more death trap? Sir, Park ventured as they lifted off, Earth shrinking below them like a bad memory with gravity. Don't you want to know more about the mission? The Death World Alliance, protocol?
Protocol?
Grissom pulled out a flask from somewhere that definitely violated several laws of physics and possibly causality.
Let me tell you something about protocol. You know what protocol is?
A system of rules and acceptable behavior in official...
Wrong!
He took a swig that would have killed a lesser man and merely inconvenienced a greater one.
Protocol is what people hide behind when they're too scared to say what needs saying. It's a galaxy's way, making sure nothing ever gets done right, just done proper. There's a world of difference between right and proper. Huh?
I don't understand.
Of course you don't. You're still shiny.
He offered her the flask. She declined with the kind of body language that suggested her academy training covered refusing drinks from superior officers who might be legally insane.
You ever been in a real fight park?
Not that training nonsense there. Everyone follows rules.
A real, honest-to-God, somebody's gonna die today fight.
No, Sergeant.
It's beautiful.
His eyes went distant, seeing battles across a dozen worlds.
Not the dying part, that's just Tuesday. It's the moment when all the pretense drops, you know? When it's just you and them and the truth that only one of you is walking away. That's when you see who people really are. What they are. You know what humans are? Park shook her head. We're the species that looks at the moment and says, I bet you I can make this worse. He grinned, and then we do. And somehow, against all logic and several laws of physics, it works. That's what I'm gonna explain to these Alliance pricks, assuming I don't just shoot them first. You can't shoot the Deathworld Alliance. I can't. It's just another word for haven't tried hard enough. Yeah. He settled back, closing his eyes. Wake me when we get there. If anyone asks, I'm meditating. Diplomatically. Within seconds, he was snoring loud enough to violate 3 noise ordinances. Park and Taylor's exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their sudden reevaluation of their career choices. In the back of the transport, Grisham's gear shifted slightly, revealing what looked suspiciously like a nuclear warhead with Plan Z written on it in Sharpie. Neither of them wanted to ask about Plans A through Y. The Vertex station hung in space like a crystal chandelier designed by committee. All sharp angles and impossible geometry that made human eyes water and human stomachs consider mutiny. It was the diplomatic equivalent of a peacock. Beautiful, impractical, and somehow still threatening despite its best effort to appear civilized. Ambassador Saravi stood at the viewing port 7, watching the morning traffic with the kind of careful attention that came from 3 decades of not getting assassinated. His reflection caught in the transparent aluminum showed a being who'd evolved past the need for violence. Tall, ethereal, with blue-gray skin that shifted through bioluminescent patterns depending on his mood. Currently, it was displaying what his species called bureaucratic satisfaction, and what humans would call the color of a tax form.
The humans are late,
his aide noted, a 12-armed Bendarian named Flux who could file paperwork in 6 languages simultaneously. The humans are always late, Saravi replied, his voice carrying the harmonics of someone who'd learned patience as a survival skill. It's their way of establishing dominance. They arrive precisely when they mean to, usually after everyone else has worried themselves into compliance. He'd been studying humans for years, the way a botanist might study a particularly aggressive weed. They were fascinating in their contradiction, capable of breathtaking art and jaw-dropping violence, sometimes in the same action. He'd once watched a human marine paint a landscape using the blood of his enemies and somehow make it beautiful. The marine had called it therapeutic expression. The therapy clearly wasn't working.
Sir.
Flux's middle arms gestured at a datapad.
The preliminary intelligence on the representative just arrived.
Saravi accepted the pad with the resignation of someone who was about to read their own death warrant. Let me guess. Another admiral who thinks volume equals authority?
Worse, they sent a sergeant.
A sergeant? Saravi's patterns flickered to confused beige. That's barely an officer. That is what they're used for. His words died as he read the file. His skin went through 17 different colors in 3 seconds, a rainbow of bureaucratic horror. This can't be right.
I've verified it 3 times, sir. Gunnery Sergeant Buck Grissom. The humans call him Hellfire. His psychological profile just says yes under every category, even the ones that contradict each other.
Well, he can't be stable and unstable.
Apparently, sir, he's achieved some sort of quantum superposition of sanity.
Saravi read on, each line adding another shade of worried purple to his complexion.
It says here, he once ended a hostage situation by taking himself hostage and then negotiating his own release for one hell of a sandwich.
Did it work?
The report says everyone was too confused to keep fighting. 3 marriages were proposed during the ceasefire. None of them involved him.
And this is who Earth sends for a formal diplomatic inquiry.
It appears so, sir.
Saravi set the pad down very carefully, the way one might place an armed explosive. In 30 years of diplomatic service, he had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer. He'd negotiated with the devourers of Antares, who ate their negotiating partners as a sign of respect. Mediated between the twin consciousnesses of Gemini, who existed in 2 realities and disagreed with themselves, and once had to explain to the Hive Queen of Plantaris why individuality wasn't a communicable disease. But humans were different. They didn't follow the rules because they didn't genuinely seem to know that there were rules. They treated first contact protocols like suggestions, turned trade negotiations into drinking games, and somehow convinced 3 separate species that something called karaoke was a form of worship.
Double the security,
Saravi ordered.
triple it. Actually, just evacuate the lower levels.
Sir, he's just one human.
Flux, the last just one human we dealt with, taught the monks of perpetual silence how to beatbox. I haven't shut up since.
In the Celestial Lounge, General Zivon was holding court with the precision of a being who'd turned condescension into an art form. His chrome jaw, a replacement after an unfortunate encounter with a human who'd taken offense to being called primitively bilateral, caught the light as he spoke.
The human problem,
he was saying to a rapt audience of minor functionaries and major sycophants,
is one of evolution. They developed on a world that couldn't decide whether to kill them with predators, or weather, or gravity. So they adapted to punch all 3. They are not a species. They are a compilation of survival mechanisms held together by spite and caffeine.
Surely they must have some redeeming qualities,
suggested a young Altarian diplomat who'd clearly never met a human.
Oh, they're remarkably creative,
Zivon admitted.
They once turned a mining dispute into a dance competition. They won the mining rights, traumatized 3 species with something called breakdancing, and somehow started a cultural revolution on Kepler 442b. The Keplerians now have a holiday called Getting Jiggy with It. No one knows what it means, least of all them.
The crowd laughed with the kind of nervous energy that came from not being sure if the joke was funny or an omen of doom.
But mark my words,
Zivon continued, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused.
Humanity's chaos will be their downfall. The galaxy operates on order, on careful negotiation, and mutual respect. Humans operate on what they call gut feelings and hold my beer. They're an extinction event that learned to use tools.
Crown Prince Zaxilon, all 7 limbs draped artfully across 3 chairs, nodded sagely.
I heard they invented something called extreme ironing. They literally risk death to press fabric. How does a species like that achieve spaceflight? Stubbornness,
Zivon said flatly.
They looked at the vast, uncaring universe, and they took it as a personal challenge. Do you know what their first message to the galactic community was? Not greetings, not peace. They broadcast something called "Never Going to Give You Up" on all frequencies. We thought it was a threat. Turns out it's what they call a prank. They rickrolled the galaxy.
What is a rickroll?
We still don't know. The linguistics department has 3 researchers in therapy trying to figure it out.
Meanwhile, in the service corridors, Translator Twig was having what her species diplomatically called a moment, and what humans would call a panic attack. She was new, fresh from the academy where they'd taught her 47 languages and 0 practical skills for dealing with the galaxy's more colorful citizens. She was also, unfortunately, assigned to translate for the incoming human representative.
It will be fine, she told herself, her tentacle hair writhing with anxiety.
Her species, the Neuralites, were natural translators. They could parse meaning from tone, context, even pheromones. It made them invaluable in diplomacy and absolutely terrible at poker.
Humans can't be that bad. The Academy said that they're just enthusiastically informal.
The Academy, she was beginning to realize, had lied like a rug. Her supervisor, a battle-scarred Centaurian named Griselda, who'd survived translating for 17 species, including the ones that communicated through interpretive violence, found her hyperventilating into a waste receptacle.
First human assignment?
Griselda asked with the kind of sympathy reserved for the condemned.
The brief said that they're aggressively casual and prone to colorful metaphors. What does that even mean?
It means, Griselda pulled out what was definitely contraband alcohol,
that you're about to learn why we have hazard pay and therapy coverage. Extensive therapy coverage.
But I'm just translating. How bad could it be?
Griselda's laugh held notes of hysteria and prophecy.
Sweet summer child. Humans don't use language the way that we do. We use it to communicate. They use it as a weapon, in art form, and sometimes just to see what happens. I once had to translate a human trade negotiation where they convinced the merchants of Beetlejuice to accept vibes as legal tender.
That's impossible.
The merchants now have a department of vibes. It's their most profitable division.
Twig's color shifted to a pale green that indicated either nausea or enlightenment.
Any advice?
Don't try to translate literally. Don't try to make sense of their metaphors. And whatever you do, never, ever ask them to explain a joke. I made that mistake once. The explanation took 3 hours, and somehow involved the mating habits of something called a platypus. I still don't know if the platypus is real or just part of the joke.
And what if I can't do it?
Griselda patted her with the kind of gentleness reserved for the walking dead.
Then you'll join the rest of us in the support group. We meet Thursdays. We mostly just drink and try to forget the time a human convinced the Hive Collective that individuality was contagious.
Did they believe it?
They quarantined their queen for a month. She came out with a tattoo and opinions. Hive hasn't been the same since.
As if summoned by the mention of chaos, alarm bells began blaring. Not the normal diplomatic incident alarms, or even someone brought the wrong fork to dinner alarms. These were the special alarms, the ones that either meant the station was under attack, or someone had done something so monumentally stupid it achieved the same thing.
What's happening?
Twig asked, though her rapidly shifting colors suggested she already knew. Griselda checked her communicator and sighed with the weariness of someone who had seen too much and drunk too little.
The human transport just arrived, and they docked in the wrong bay. That's what caused the alarms? No. The alarms are there because the bay they chose was the VIP lounge, and...
She showed Twig the security feed. On the screen, a small human in armor that looked like it had been through several wars, and at least one divorce, was standing in the middle of the galaxy's most exclusive gathering spot. He was holding what appeared to be a plunger modified into a weapon, and asking the seven-limbed crown prince if he was the bartender or the entertainment.
"Oh no,"
Twig whispered. "Oh yes," Griselda corrected. "Welcome to human diplomacy. Try not to die." He woke up in chains, which was becoming a Tuesday tradition. The courtroom, if you could call an arena with stadium seating a courtroom, thrummed with anticipation. Thousands of beings from across the Alliance filled the seats. Their collective attention focused on the small human in the center, who was already looking for exits and weapons despite barely being conscious. The arena itself was a masterpiece of intimidation and architecture. The Death World Alliance had designed it to remind everyone that they were the galaxy's apex predators who'd learned to use words instead of teeth. Usually. The floor was made from compressed asteroid material that had survived planetary collisions. The walls displayed holographic reminders of what happened to species who disrupted galactic peace. Most of them were very flat now.
"Gunnery Sergeant Buck Grisham,"
the central judge intoned. She was a Thanagarian adjudicator, a species that had evolved beyond the need for bias by developing 17 different brain lobes dedicated solely to being disappointingly fair. Her forearms folded in universal disapproval, each gesture calibrated to convey exactly how much trouble Grissom was in. It was, to use Earth measurements, a metric shitload.
"You stand accused of assault, destruction of property, violations of 16 diplomatic protocols, and, is this correct, attempted bartending without a license?"
"I object," Grissom said, testing his chains. They were quantum-locked, designed to hold beings who could phase through dimensions. Grissom was examining them with the interest of someone who'd escaped from worse using nothing but spite and a paperclip.
"That prince threw the first punch, and I just threw the last one. Through an airlock, like a real American." "You cannot object. It is not how trials work."
"Well, what's the point of having one? It kind of seems like you already made up your minds." He shifted, and somehow the chains made a sound like they were considering surrender.
"Back on Earth, we call this a kangaroo court. No offense to any kangaroos in the audience. Y'all could probably punch better than Prince Twinkle Limbs anyway."
General Zavon rose from the prosecutor's platform like karma in a chrome jaw. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Grissom, analyzing weak points and finding surprisingly few. The last human he'd prosecuted had broken his original jaw, but he'd learned to upgrade. He'd also learned to stand outside of throwing range, which was why he was 30 feet away behind bulletproof glass.
"This beast,"
he began, his voice modulated through speakers that added unnecessary bass for dramatic effect,
"exemplifies everything gone wrong with humanity. Violence without purpose. Chaos without meaning. They are a contagion that must be—"
Shut your metal mouth,"
Grissom interrupted.
"You're gonna bore me to death, or are you gonna actually make a point? 'Cause I got places to be. Specifically, a bar. A real bar. With peanuts. And those little umbrellas in the drinks so you can stab people with if they get mouthy."
"This is a trial for the fate of your species."
Well, then maybe you should have brought snacks. What kind of trial doesn't have snacks? Even Death Row gets a last meal. So all I'm asking for is some beef jerky and maybe a beer. Hell, I'll take alien jerky. What's that stuff made from? Those six-legged cow things?
"Prophylaxis,"
Twig supplied helpfully from her translator's podium. then immediately regretted speaking as every eye in the arena turned to her. Yeah, those, the Bova Lux Duke Jerky. Yeah, no, she gets it, see? What's your name, darling?
I translate Twig, sir.
Twig? Is that your real name? Or is that what you got stuck with because humans can't pronounce a real one?
The latter, sir.
That figures. We're real good at that. I once knew a guy from Arcturus. 16 syllables in his name. All of them sounding like clearing your throat. So we called him Bob. They seemed happier that way.
Grissom turned back to the judges.
So what's this about? Someone mad that I redecorated their fancy drinking establishment?
You threw Crown Prince Exelon into a garbage processor.
He got better, didn't he? Besides, he landed in the organic waste. I mean, that's basically a spa treatment on some planets. It's probably the most action he's seen in decades.
The crowd murmured. Several species who did, in fact, consider organic waste therapeutic made notes to review their spa options. Ambassador Saravi watched from his position on the tribunal with the fascination of someone witnessing a train wreck in slow motion. He'd spent decades perfecting the art of diplomatic neutrality, and here was this human, this small, loud, impossible human, treating the most serious trial in recent memory like a particularly boring traffic stop.
Perhaps,
Saravi suggested, his pattern shifting to the blue hues of intrigue.
We should allow the defendant to understand the full scope of the charges. I understand plenty,
Grissom shot back.
You're mad because humans don't play by your rules. Well, here's a newsflash. Your rules are stupid. You got 17 protocols for how to hold a fork, but 0 for what to do when somebody actually needs help. You will debate for decades about trade routes while people are starving. You call that a civilization. I call it constipation. You're all backed up with your own importance and nowhere to go.
The defendant will show respect to this court.
Respect is earned, your honorableness. So far, all you've earned is my continued consciousness. That's only because these chains are actually pretty comfortable. It's good lumbar support. My compliments to your dungeon keeper.
Zivon's eye was practically spinning now.
You see? Do you all see? This is what they're like. No respect for authority. No understanding of proper behavior. They're animals!
Hey now.
Grissom looked genuinely offended for the first time.
That is an insult to animals. Animals have instincts. They kill to eat or defend territory. Humans? We're way more creative than that. We will fight over the color of a flag, the name of a god, or who makes the best barbecue sauce. We're not animals, Chrome Dome. We're artists, and violence is our medium.
You admit it then. You admit that your species is nothing but violence.
I admit that we're honest about it.
Grissom leaned forward as much as the chains allowed.
Every species in this room evolved from something that killed to survive. The only difference is, we remember it. You all have buried your violence under so many rules and protocols that you've forgotten it's there. But it is. And when push comes to shove, when your perfect little civilization starts cracking, you'll remember to. And you will wish that you've been practicing like we have.
The arena fell silent. Not the polite silence of consideration, but the uncomfortable silence of truth rudely interrupting a pleasant lie. It was Twig who broke it, her translation carrying across the arena with perfect clarity. He's not wrong, you know. Every head turned to her. She seemed to shrink under the attention, but continued, her color shifting through anxiety to determination. I've been studying the histories. Every species here has a violent pest. The Danagarians were apex predators who ate their young until they developed philosophy. The Regalians had 7 world wars before they achieved spaceflight. Even the Aetherians, sorry, Crown Prince, they once fought a century-long war over the proper way to fold napkins. The only difference is that humans are...
She searched for the word.
recent.
Recent? Saravi prompted, genuinely curious.
Well, they've only been in space for 3 centuries. Most species have had millennia to forget who they were. Humans are still becoming. They're not violent because they're primitive. They're violent because they remember being prey, and they refuse to be again.
Grissom looked at the young translator with something approaching respect. See? She gets it. Did you say your name was again?
Twig, sir.
Nah, that's what we call you because we're lazy. What's your real name? She made a sound like wind chimes having an anxiety attack in a hurricane. Yeah, okay, no, Twig it is. But you got potential. Stick with me, kid, and I will teach you the fine arts of diplomatic incidents.
That's not really...
Too late, I already decided. You are my cultural attaché now. First lesson, always carry hot sauce. Fixes any meal and it works as emergency mace.
I don't think that's...
Enough! Zivon slammed his fist onto the podium, denting the metal. This circus ends now. Do you want to act like savages? Then face justice like one. I invoke the right of combat. The arena gasped. Several translators fainted. Someone in the back started taking bets. Saravi's patterns went through several alarming colors.
General, the right of combat hasn't been invoked in...
700 cycles, I know. Zavon's chrome jaw gleamed with satisfaction. But it's still legal, still binding. The defendant faces his accuser in physical combat, and when I destroy him, humanity's threat will be proven, and we can quarantine their entire system.
When?
Grissom was grinning now, a sight that made several species reconsider their life choices. That's awful confident for someone whose jaw comes with a warranty. You dare!
I dare? I dare?
Grissom stood as much as the chains allowed, which somehow made him seem larger than his 5'2" frame should allow.
Boy, I have been daring since your species figured out fire. I've dared death, marriages, and gas stations, Sushi. You think that you scare me? You're just another tin-plated bully who thinks that violence is beneath him until he needs it. Well, congratulations, Papa. You just asked a human to dance. Hope you brought your dancing shoes.
Then you accept.
Accept? Hell, I'm thrilled. I was worried this was gonna be boring. When do we start?
No. The chains dissolved. The floor of the arena began to shift. Platforms rising and walls extending. The crowd pressed against the barriers. A mixture of horror and anticipation on faces that had evolved beyond such base entertainment, but couldn't look away. Grissom rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and pulled out a cigar from somewhere that, once again, physics suggested shouldn't exist. One question, though, he said, biting off the end and spitting it at Javon's feet. There are rules to this thing? No rules, no mercy. Fight until one yields or dies. Grissom's grin could have powered a small city and traumatized a large one. Outstanding. The prosecutor's case was admittedly compelling. The holographic evidence filled the arena like the greatest hits album of human chaos. There was footage of humans arm-wrestling Regalian crushers into traction. A Marine doing donuts in a commandeered war mech while blasting something that sounded suspiciously like heavy metal. 3 separate incidents of humans winning drinking contests against species that literally metabolized alcohol as food. Behold! Zavon gestured dramatically.
The human contagion in action. They turn our peace conferences into combat zones. Our trade negotiations into endurance contests. They once turned a funeral, and I quote from the official report, the most epic wake this side of Andromeda.
That was a beautiful service, Grissom said, wiping what might have been a tear. Sergeant Taylor's would have loved it, especially the part where we launched his coffin into the sun while playing his mixtape.
You set 12 ships on fire.
They were funeral pyres. It's called culture, you chrome-dome jackass. The crowd murmured. Several species who practiced ceremonial immolation nodded appreciatively. Ambassador Saravi stood from his position on the tribunal, his blue-gray skin shimmering with bioluminescent stress patterns. Perhaps we should allow the human to speak in his own defense. Finally, someone with sense, yeah. Grissom stood, chains clanking. You want to know what humans are about? I'll tell you a story. You got time for a story, Chrome Dome?
My name is General Zivon.
Nobody cares. So, there I was, Europa 2387. You remember that mess? When those void wasps broke through the ice? The arena was quiet. Everyone remembered Europa. So, my squad, 12 Marines, 3 engineers, and 1 cook who wouldn't shut up about his mother's tamales, were the only thing between those bugs and 30,000 civilians. We had had enough ammo for maybe 20 minutes. Evacuation needed 3 hours. Grissom's voice dropped, losing its mocking edge. You want to know what we did? We got creative. We turned the whole mining rig into a weapon. We used cooking oil for flamethrowers. We rigged the coffee makers into bombs. And if you've ever had marine coffee, you know that's barely a modification. Did you win? Twig, the nervous translator, asked from her station.
Define winning.
Grissom shrugged. 3 of us walked out. 30,000 civilians made it to ships. And then, somewhere on the ice, there is a memorial to 9 humans who looked at impossible odds and said, yeah, but what if we try anyway?
This proves nothing.
Zivon snarled.
Only that humans glorify their own destruction.
Nah. Grissom cracked his neck. Proves we don't know when to quit. You think that makes us dangerous? Yeah, you're damn right it does. And here's the thing. We're dangerous to the things that need destroying. We are the species that looks at a problem everyone else calls impossible and says, hold my beer.
Exactly.
Zivon began, but Grissom wasn't done. You know what your problem is, all of you? Again? He gestured around the arena. You have so many rules, so many protocols that, I'll tell you again, you forgot how to actually live. You see humans having a bar fight and you think it's chaos. We call it Tuesday. You see us turning a trade negotiation into a drinking contest and you think that we're uncivilized. That is efficient. Why waste time with 40 hours of talks? You can settle it in 4 beers.
You certainly cannot suggest that.
I'm suggesting, Grissom said, that you're scared. Not of our weapons or our wars. You're scared because we remind you that underneath all your fancy civilization, you're still just jumped-up monkeys who learn to use tools. Just like us. At least we're honest. The arena erupted. Half the crowd shouted in offense, the other half in something that sounded suspiciously like agreement. Zivon's chrome jaw practically sparked with rage.
Enough!
The general slammed a control.
If the human loves violence so much, then let him prove his worth in the ancient way. Trial by combat.
Grissom grinned. And now you're talking my language. The rules were simple. Survive whatever the arena threw at you. Make your case through action, not words. First one to yield or die loses. Do you realize
Saravi said quietly as the preparations were made.
That Zivon is enhanced with military-grade cybernetics. He could literally tear you apart.
Yeah? Grissom was doing stretches that looked more like threats.
I fought 3 ex-wives in divorce courts. Your boy's gonna learn about real enhancement. The kind that comes from pure, concentrated spite.
The arena floor cleared. Energy barriers shimmered to life. Zivon stood at one end, 7 feet of chrome and barely contained xenophobia. Grissom stood at the other, 5 feet of compressed dad energy and bad decisions.
Any last words, human?
Grissom pulled out a cigar, bit the end off, and spit it at Zivon's feet.
Yeah, your mother was so-so in bed.
The sound Zivon made wasn't in any translator database. It charged. What followed would later be required viewing at every military academy in the galaxy, filed under asymmetrical warfare and why humans are banned from competition fighting. Grissom didn't fight with technique or grace. He fought like a man who'd learned combat in bars, battlefields, and one memorable incident in a Denny's parking lot. When Zivon threw a punch that could shatter steel, Grissom didn't block. He headbutted the fist. When the general used his enhanced speed for a grapple, Grissom bit him. Actually bit him, chrome and all.
It's not fair,
Zivon lisped through damaged vocal processors.
Fair?
Grissom spit out a chrome tooth.
Fair is for fairy tales and tax codes. This is a fight.
The moment Zivon adapted to Grissom's brawling, the human changed tactics. He started narrating the fight like a sports commentator, complete with the play-by-play of Zivon's mounting frustration. That stopped working. He began critiquing the general's form with the expertise of a disappointed parent.
You see, your problem is your thinking.
Grissom dodged a blow that left a crater in the floor.
Fighting ain't about thinking. It's about feeling, and right now, I feel like you need therapy more than you need victory. Yeah, maybe. Shut up! It's classic overcompensation. You were bullied as a larva, weren't you?
The end came not through any grand technique, but through the most human tactic of all. Audacity. As Zivon wound up for a finishing blow, Grissom pulled out a half-empty bottle of bourbon from seemingly nowhere, took a swig, smashed it over the general's head.
Where did you even get that? Trade secret.
Grissom grabbed the stunned general by his damaged jaw and hurled him into the arena's advertising board. The impact sent letters scattering, rearranging diplomatic solutions into dip-lom-tick-so-utions. Zivon didn't get up. Grissom stood in the center of the arena, bloodied but unbroken. He lit his cigar with a lighter that had been definitely confiscated earlier.
Anyone else want to discuss humanity's place in the galaxy? No? Outstanding.
But the trial wasn't over, not by a long shot. The assassination attempt came during the recess, because, of course, it did. Grissom had just found the one bathroom in the entire station designed for human anatomy when the wall exploded.
Ow, for the love of...
He didn't even get to finish cursing before the plasma bolt started flying.
Can a man take a leak without someone trying to murder him? It's worse than my 3rd wedding.
The kill team was professional. 6 operatives in full tactical gear, moving with the precision of beings who murdered for a living and probably had dental plans. They planned for everything. Except for Grissom's emergency pocket gum.
Seriously?
The lead assassin paused, watching Grissom frantically chewing.
You're stress-eating. Now?
Nah. Grissom stuck the wad under the sink.
Just needed to freshen my breath up for this.
The explosion took out half the bathroom and all of the kill team's dignity. Grissom emerged from the smoke wearing a toilet seat like a crown and carrying what appeared to be a plunger modified into a weapon.
Twig!
He grabbed the translator, who was hyperventilating in a corner.
We're leaving.
But you're supposed to be dead.
Story of my life, kid. Where's Blue Boy?
Saravi was waiting in an access corridor, his patterns flickering between concerned and what have I done? This was Sivan's backup plan, if he couldn't win legally even.
Yeah, you go for good old murder, yeah, I figured. Politicians are the same everywhere.
Grissom checked his improvised plunger weapon.
You got a ship?
Why would I?
Because you're either with me or against me, and I've got a toilet plunger with your name on it if it's option number 2.
Saravi's pattern settled on, reluctantly impressed. Docking Bay 7. The ship was a diplomatic courier, which meant it was fast, unarmed, and had a sound system worth more than most colonies. Grissom immediately christened it the Mistake and set about making modifications that would void 17 different warranties. What's he doing? Twig watched him rewire something that definitely shouldn't be rewired.
I'm turning this fancy tin can into something useful. Hand me that wrench.
This is a ceremonial staff of office.
And now it's a wrench. Progress.
By the time the security figured out they'd been played, the Mistake was already breaking orbit. Grissom had somehow turned the ship's communication array into a broadcasting station and was adjusting what looked suspiciously like a microphone made from the bathroom fixtures.
Ladies, gentlemen, and everything in between.
His voice boomed across every channel in the galaxy.
This is Gunnery Sergeant Buck Hellfire Grissom coming at you live from the USS Screw Your Protocols. In about 20 minutes, I'm going to turn this Peace Summit into the galaxy's first mobile bar. And you're all invited to Trial Part 2 Electric Boogaloo.
You can't just... Saravi started.
Watch me, Blue. Twig, you know any good bar songs?
What?
Never mind, I'll teach you. Goes like this. 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 bottles...
The Galactic Peace Summit was the kind of event that made history books nervous. Every major power in known space had sent representatives to discuss trade routes, territorial disputes, and the concerning rise in human-related incidents. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, a neutral ground that could house 10,000 delegates in luxury. It was not, however, designed to withstand Grissom. The Mistake came in hot, broadcasting Earth music at volumes that qualified as sonic warfare. Grissom had welded armor plating made from vending machines to the hull and painted diplomatic immunity on the side in what might have been ketchup. Sir, Twig said, now wearing a helmet made from a wastebasket, I don't think this is legal.
Legal's for people who can't punch their way out of problems.
Grissom steered with one hand and mixed drinks with the other.
Saravi, you ready?
The ambassador had undergone a transformation. 3 hours of Grissom's influence had replaced his diplomatic robes with improvised armor and his careful speech with what could generously be called enthusiasm.
Let us negotiate aggressively!
He actually whooped. Saravi whooped.
Woo!
They hit the summit's docking bay like a missile made of bad decisions. Grissom had rigged the ship's emergency slides to deploy beer foam instead of flame suppressant. Security forces expecting a tactical insertion got a bubble party.
Citizens of the galaxy!
Grissom stood atop his ship, brandishing a megaphone that was definitely stealing power from life support.
You wanted to know what humans are about? Well, we're about this!
He pressed a button. Every screen in the summit switched to what Grissom had labeled Humans' Greatest Hits. The compilation that included everything from the moon landing to someone successfully parallel parking on the first try.
We're the species that looked at space and said, needs more explosions!
He was in full sermon mode now.
We're the people who invented both nuclear weapons and pizza delivery. We turned killing each other into an art form, then turned around and invented antibiotics because we felt bad about it.
This is insane. General Zivan appeared on the main stage, his jaw freshly repaired and his rage freshly renewed.
Security, Arrest this maniac! Can't arrest what you can't catch, Cromdome.
Grissom had somehow acquired a jetpack. No one was quite sure from where.
You want your trial? Let's make it official.
What followed would later be known as the 16 minutes that changed galactic politics, or in human textbooks, the time Sarge went full Florida man. Grissom turned the summit into a gladiatorial arena, with delegates either fleeing or taking sides. He fought Siobhan across 17 levels of the station, using everything from serving trays to a confused delegate as a weapon. At one point, he rode a cleaning robot into battle while dual-wielding mops.
Humans are chaos!
Siobhan screamed, blocking a blow from what appeared to be a stale baguette.
You prove it with every action! Wrong!
Grissom parried with the ladle.
We're not chaos. We're jazz. What? Improvisation, you tin-plated twit. We make it up as we go, and sometimes it works.
He demonstrated by turning a fire suppression system into an impromptu water slide.
You plan for everything except someone doing something stupid enough to work.
The fight raged through the summit's main hall, the kitchen, where Grissom briefly paused to make a sandwich, and finally to the observation deck, where the galaxy's elite watched in horror and/or fascination.
Yield!
Siobhan had Grissom in a chokehold.
Admit humanity is a mistake. The only mistake,
Grissom wheezed,
is your face.
He broke free using a technique that was definitely not in any manual, something between a dance move and a seizure. In the confusion, he managed to grab Siobhan, and in a feat of strength fueled by pure spite, launched him through the air. The general hit the billboard advertising, "Diplomatic solutions work," with enough force to rearrange it into "Dip-lo-matic so-lut-yuns-wo-erk."
That's close enough,
Grissom panted. The aftermath was the kind of silence that made history hold its breath. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, came slow clapping. It was Twig, still wearing her wastebasket helmet, tears streaming down her face. "That," she said, "was the most beautiful violence I've ever seen." The clapping spread. Not from everyone. Plenty of delegates looked ready to declare war on humanity out of principle. But enough. Enough beings who'd sat through centuries of careful negotiations that went nowhere. Who'd watched conflicts drag on because no one wanted to be impolite. Who'd seen problems fester because the proper forms hadn't been filed. "So," Grissom addressed the assembled powers, still catching his breath. "We're gonna talk about humanity's place in the galaxy, or do I need to fight someone else? 'Cause I got like 6 more jokes about Siobhan's mother." The head of the tribunal stood, all 4 arms spread in a gesture of cosmic exhaustion.
The Alliance finds that humanity is unique.
"That's one word for it," someone muttered.
You are chaotic, violent, and completely unpredictable, she continued. You're also innovative, resilient, and apparently impossible to kill. The Tribunal rules that Earth will be granted provisional membership in the Alliance under a new classification.
Which is?
Special Circumstances Observer.
She rubbed her primary forehead.
Essentially, you'll be present for all major decisions to provide alternative perspectives.
You mean to stop us from crashing your parties?
I mean to channel your chaos productively. Sergeant Grissom, you are hereby appointed as Earth's permanent representative.
I get a bar?
We'll discuss amenities.
And you got a deal. 6 months later, Grissom's Galactic Grog was the most infamous establishment in Alliance space. Located directly across from the council chambers, it served drinks that were technically legal and food that was definitely a war crime. You see, Grissom explained to a fresh batch of diplomatic interns, the secret to human diplomacy is honesty. We don't pretend to be better than we are.
We are violent, we're loud, and we solve half our problems by hitting them. But
they poured a round of something that glowed ominously.
We're also the same species that'll fight to the death for people that we just met. Because it's the right thing to do.
That doesn't make any sense, one of the interns protested. Exactly. Twig, now sporting a leather jacket with Earth's Apprentice on the back, slammed down a beer. Humans don't make sense. That's why they work. Saravi, who'd somehow become the bar's regular entertainment with his dramatic retellings of the Grissom incident, raised his glass.
To humanity. To the galaxy's worst, best idea. And to us, Grissom added. The poor bastards who gotta live with them.
The bar erupted in laughter. The dozen species united in a universal truth that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe needed someone willing to punch it in the face and buy it a beer afterward. Outside, the Alliance continued its careful dance of politics and protocol. But now, when negotiations stalled or conflicts arose, someone would inevitably suggest, maybe we should ask the humans. And somewhere in the galaxy, a new phrase entered the universal lexicon, going full Grissom. Verb. To solve a problem through such audacious stupidity that it loops back around to genius. Use sparingly. Side effects include bar fights, diplomatic incidents, and occasionally saving the galaxy. But damn if it doesn't work.